Oh, okay. We're back.
We need intro music. I think that we
do.
definitely need like
We need intro music. We need like that mic drop that the All In podcast has.
I know. How do we get that person?
We're not as cool.
We're not as
rich
cool
or famous. So
no. We're the exact opposite. Okay, all right. Okay. We are back with episode 8 of Product Champs. I had to look it up on YouTube. We just all looked up on YouTube because it's been a while since we've done this, apparently. By the way, just as a very quick aside, for my own work job, right? We've been trying to teach companies how important it is to create content consistently. Consistency is key in content. And for our own podcast, we are failing that lesson miserably. So anyhow,
I wouldn't say we're failing miserably.
Not
no,
miserably.
we are failing miserably. There's
Miserably.
zero consistency.
Yeah.
Sometimes we do it every other week.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes every week. Sometimes we're out on Friday. Sometimes we're out on, like, we are just awful.
Yeah.
Even the content that we produce is like, what are we gonna talk about this week, guys?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. We're in the test and learn pre-product market fit stage. Okay, but this week, so this is episode 8 of Product Champs. Our semi-weekly, bi-monthly.
No, it's weekly. Which a couple of weeks missed, but it's weekly.
Fair enough. About products, about careers, about life. We're still experimenting, as you guys heard us mention, about content. This week, we thought we'd do something a little bit different. So last week, we talked about, or the last time, we talked about Bitcoin. And what do product managers think with regards to Bitcoin? And, something that we really enjoy, the four of us, doing outside the pod is just riffing on product ideas, right? If we were challenged or faced with a product problem or a problem in our life, how would we solve it? And we thought we'd take that idea and apply it to the podcast. So this week, we're going to take on the space of buying a house. So what do product managers think about buying a house? Or rather, how would product managers make the process of buying a house a lot easier, better, more delightful, whatever? Let's get to it.
Yeah. Hey, DZ, how do you do this? How do you just do an intro so nicely in one take?
Practice.
Okay. Well, you just in front of the mirror, do these intros?
Okay. I'll tell you one thing, since we're on this topic. I remember this moment specifically in my life. When I was younger and in consulting, I remember a specific conversation where I decided to start talking without knowing how I was going to end the sentence, right? I consciously started saying words, not knowing where the sentence was going. And then I got through the sentence. And ever since, I'm like, F it. My brain will figure this shit out between now and 30 seconds from now when I did complete this thought. Like that.
I was gonna say I do this all the time. So I was like, should I not be doing this?
No, that's what you should be doing. You should start the sentence and then you trust yourself. Trust your brain will fill it in somehow. That's the answer, Samir. Trust yourself.
Okay. Can I say a couple things before we officially start? One is I've got some data that I forgot to call out.
Okay.
From our podcasts. So we have a majority of our listeners on Spotify, 60% in the United States, 40% in Canada, or 14% in Canada, 8% in Australia.
Nice. Samir's family.
Yeah, probably. Yes.
Thank you, Samir's mom, for all your listens.
Yeah.
And then the next 3 countries are Australia, Germany, UAE, and Kenya.
Huh.
So, wow. Nice.
Yeah. Go Kenya.
Yeah. And then the second thing is I think given that we're trying this new form of content, we'll be putting maybe a survey or something in the link below.
Put a survey
so we can get some feedback, and then
that's a great idea.
We can continuously
iterate
and go from there. Cool.
Okay.
All right. Start us off.
Yeah, it's been so long. I forgot our usual routines. Okay, just to recap, we are going to talk about what do product managers think about buying a house. In the next 30, 45 minutes, we're going to break down this problem a little bit, talk about our own personal relationships with buying a house, talk about where the problems are, and then try to solution a little bit and riff. We'll see where this goes. So let's just start with that first question of for each of us, what was your experience when or how, or what was your vibe when you purchased a home?
I'll start.
Avi, go for it.
I've most recently purchased a home.
we purchased our first home about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. And
Congrats.
thank you. We're super excited. You know, I was mentioning before the pod started just how expensive it's getting now that we've bought homes. I think that's one problem, right? Everybody tells you buying a home is expensive. Like it's not intuitive how quickly it gets expensive and in what way it gets expensive. I guess you can kind of estimate it in some ways, but it's really difficult to have paid probably the biggest sum of money you've paid in your entire life and then pay continuously large sums immediately after that. But I'd say for us, like the process of finding a house took a very, very long time. Like just aligning mine and my wife's tastes in terms of what we want, figuring out what our actual budget was and like what areas we want to live in, figuring out the balance between like what we could afford versus schools versus like so many, like how to weigh all the different factors and what you can get in a house and whether we should be looking for our first house or our forever house was like a big conversation between us. And then I think there are some easier parts of it, right? I think like the financing part of it was like actually pretty easy to figure out. Like it wasn't that hard to navigate. I thought it would be one of the hardest parts of the process. I think working with an agent, at least for us, had like a ton of value, and really added to the process. Yeah, I think so. Like a very difficult process, but like one where we learned a lot and it took us a long time.
Okay. Plus under. I'll go next real quick since there's a couple things Avi mentioned that we experienced as well. Avi, you made this comment early on about how even aligning your and your wife on what you actually wanted was surprisingly difficult, right? Like we were the same, right? Like, you know, you think you know what you want, and then you realize, especially where we as context, we bought a home in the Bay Area in 2017. A terrible time to buy a home in general, but especially in the Bay Area. We probably made 20 offers starting in 2015, 25 offers maybe, lost all of them, and finally won this last one. And I can remember for the home we bought, I literally spent 15 minutes in the house. like it listed on a Wednesday. We came by, I walked through it, 15 minutes. The next day we met, like the biggest purchase of my life by like 2 orders of magnitude, 15 minutes of time. And in that process, of those 20 offers, we started with this longer list of how many bedrooms in the neighborhood and what does the front look like? Does it have a yard, right? Is it on a big street or is it, blah, 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 blah. And you just get whittled down to what is absolutely
Definitely
critical. And for us, it turned out to be a few surprising things. One is a high ceiling. You can't fix low ceilings. Like you can fix a lot of stuff about the interior house, except your ceiling height. That's really difficult to fix. So that was one. Homes that have a high ceiling just feel different than ones that are have a low ceiling. Second was that, and this is more me, I wanted a home that was on a quiet street. We saw lots of homes on, very nice homes on major streets, and we just never get ourselves over the hurdle. And the thing we gave up on was pretty much everything else. So our home today doesn't have a very big yard. There is, however, a park, half a block away. But I think to your point, Avi, like kind of discovering what we really cared about was not a straight line process. It wasn't like there's a worksheet we filled out together and we're like, yeah, that's the list. There was like a brutalness to it, right? You just kind of had to chip away at this and really understand what you're willing to sacrifice and not.
I like that, DZ. I think that, yeah, we had a very similar experience and like, also like balancing that with like, I think I just got whittled down in terms of just putting in so many offers and wondering if we were eventually settling, right? So like whether we had whittled down too far the criteria, right? I think at some point you just get burned out from the process and just decide like, we just need a house. So that definitely rings true.
Ahmad. Oh, you raised your hand. Samir.
I raised my hand.
So polite.
Yeah, because I didn't want to talk about the house as much as more make like some product comments just based on before Ahmad goes, because one of the things I was doing was considering this to be somewhat of a user research session, right? You guys are talking about the problem, or you guys are just talking about the space and a couple things I noted, and maybe it's helpful to folks that listen. I think one of the attributes of the problem I picked up from Avi was this idea of, preventing one-way doors. So I think there's this idea where Avi was talking about like some things you can change, some things you can't change. DZ, you talked about it too, right? Like the ceilings.
Yep.
There's there's things that are like one-way doors, and often when we think about decisions in products, or even like what products can be helpful, a product that helps you prevent something that cannot be undone is more valuable than a product that helps you pick something where you can just press the undo button and continue. So that's sort of like one type of value you can add. The other thing that came to my mind was this idea of like both of you put in these offers and felt like drained out, failed until you succeeded, and that just sort of gave me this idea of like, well, there's no signs of incremental success along the way, which is often one of those things where like you want to help show the user that they're making progress towards a goal, even though you just felt like offer after offer was getting rejected. So those are the two things that came to my mind. I just wanted to comment it from your story, Avi. Thanks.
Yeah, I also had some comments since we'll just harp on this theme, and maybe this is the area we go deep in. But two things that came to mind were, one is both of you guys were talking about this sort of process of elimination of deciding like, okay, what is it that you and your significant other actually want? And I started to ask myself, one, is that a solvable problem? And this, you talked about like a sheet, like a survey that you guys, and then it just finds the overlaps. But like, I feel like a lot of it is just going to require time, right? You show your wife like, hey,
yep,
what do you think about this house? And then she's like, oh, I didn't realize I hate low ceilings. I hate low ceilings. Like that's, that's out. And the second thing is that actually a problem that you did not enjoy? Like in a sense, like, do you actually enjoy, kind of like the experience of looking at various different houses and actually narrowing it down in such a way that like, okay, well, you said you want to like a single floor house. What did you think about this one? Right. Like, is there something that you actually enjoy about that process? Like, yes, it's a problem, but do you actually, secretly enjoy it?
There is something to, I mean, certainly in the early days, right? Early on when we were buying the house, it was enjoyable to like, it's one thing to see it on Redfin, right? What this home feels like. And it's a totally different thing to walk through it and imagine yourself in it. And then you start thinking about, okay, we could make this room a little bit different, blah, 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 right? And you're seeing just how wide of a variety there are of like setups, and how people live so differently. So there's an aspect of discovery, almost like a very Pinteresty kind of like, I'm discovering what's possible in the world thing. But at some point though, you're like, I also need a place to live, like at some point, even delightful things can, at the extreme can be really painful.
I agree with that. And I think it also depends on how competitive the market is, right? So
Yeah.
I think the more competitive the market, the more difficult this becomes, right? So like at a certain point, it's not just about what you like, but what house you can actually get, like what deal you can land. And I think those two things are really hard to reconcile. I want to come back to something you said, DZ, which is about that 15 minutes you get to see the house. And I think that was really difficult for me. That like, and one thing that made it really a lot easier, and we keep in mind, we're looking at a lot of houses over the course of the pandemic, was the 3D captures of houses. And I'll agree with your point, DZ, that it wasn't the same as walking through the house. But one thing I loved is having both, right? Seeing the 3D capture, walking through the house, and then be able to look back at that to think about what I would do to the house, right? Like to be able to be like, oh, maybe I could alter that room and like really have a feel for the space and how the house worked. So that like making it so I could actually stay in the house for longer, even virtually, was extremely helpful.
Sick company, by the way. They just recently IPO'd.
This is like Matterport or something?
Yeah, Matterport.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, but before we over the next one, so by the way, I'm not so to Ahmad's point, I'm not even sure like Avi and I have covered the problems. We simply covered our experience, right? And we just sort of called out a few of the things we remember from our experience. Ahmad, Samir, let's hear about your guys' experience real quick. Just the the 2-minute voiceover, and then let's see what we glean.
Sure. Yeah. So I can talk about my experience. I bought a house in November.
Congrats.
Thank you. And I think for what it's worth, like this is a problem that might be a little bit unique to me, not you three, and potentially even just people in my generation, that actually we didn't even know what the first step was. I mean, like we didn't even know like financially, should we even buy a house? So I spent a lot of time with Michelle, like actually just researching on like what the math ends up coming out to, like what we can afford, and kind of working backwards from there. So that was one problem that we experienced that we actually spent a lot of time on before we even started looking. And the math isn't like very straightforward. You got to like find, research. You got to look up a bunch of, it's like 5 or 10 different Google searches and dumping into a spreadsheet, right? Sure. And the other key problems, I'm kind of skipping through for the sake of time, just jumping to the things that like we experienced. There were big issues where the competitive market, obviously, something we also experienced. We we were forced into the Valley in a way, right? Like we ended up liking it here, but had it been my way, I would have not moved to the Valley. And even here, we ended up putting in 6 offers, and we only won 1. And this was like, I'd say 3 weeks of very intense looking, because we were living in a studio. We just did not want to be there anymore. So we were like, we're going to get a house. And, it's not like we were like ready to make whatever happen. But in the competitive market, I think something that I wish like was a little bit more, I don't know, helpful for us would have been like understanding truly what the true cost of a home was going to end up at. Because there's like all these weird mechanics,
insurance,
that you have,
maintenance.
Yeah, there's insurance, maintenance. There's also like, what is this house going to come out to after the bidding stops, right? And then there's like picking the number, right? There's like okay, I'm going to put in $1 million offer, and then I'm going to put in a contingency that I'll beat the next person by 5 up to this number, right? But then you get to like, okay, well now I'm at 1-1. If it was 1-1-10, would you have? I mean, maybe. You know what I mean? Like it's like I wish it was
Completely
more
arbitrary.
of a
it's completely
live eBay system. You know what I mean? Where it's
really?
Like, like I wish it was like you have 24 hours, everyone just dump it, and then like, I could see it get to 1-1 and then decide if I want to go to 110 or decide if I want to go 120, as opposed to making that decision like in one paper submission. So
it's not one, right? Because like the typical, I mean, I don't know your exact process, but the typical process, at least in the Bay, would be, the houses get 10 offers, right? 3 of them will be in cash. There'll be 2 low balls, right? But there'll be like 3 or 4 real offers on the table. And then the good realtors will go back to each of the prospectives and say, hey, the high offer right now is X with these terms. If you go 50 over, we can make it happen. And sometimes they do that a few cycles, although, that's a bit of a dick move. So, right.
Sometimes they bluff.
Oh, totally.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. You don't know if this guy's telling you the truth, right?
I hate that. You know what I mean? I'd rather work against a robot than an unknown content.
And you're totally right. It's for such a big decision. Like I put more thought into like how much I'm willing to pay for a pair of socks than like the offer we put on the offer of the house is like, let's take the number, let's add an arbitrary percentage, and then let's make the digits look good. Like right. That was the offer. It's so crazy. Right.
Yeah. And then, for us, like, we were, I'd say like, I'll call it 2 more problems and then I promise I'll pass. But for us, it's not like we've been saving up for a house and like, it's time to buy a house. It was like, we just barely passed the line to afford a house and then we went in, you know what I mean? And, which ultimately ended up being a good investment, but like Avi called out, there's so many other costs that like happen, right? And especially if you got, some asshole who's like coming to you and saying, remove all the contingencies. And now you're like, shit, this thing might have termites and I got to pay for that termites, right? Like it's just helpful to like have something that could tell you what the true cost of a house is so that you can understand like whether or not it's worth it besides like your own gut reaction. And then the second problem I'll call out is that I think the pressure, I think this, Avi, you felt this, TZ, you probably felt this, Samir probably feeling this, is like, you get desperate because you feel like there is no light at the end of the tunnel, right? And so you start to make trade-offs. You start to go over. But I think like if there was something that could tell me like, look, the average process is 6 months. You're going to get a house.
Expectation
right?
setting.
But, like setting the expectation that like, you're going to get a house, like I'll give you the inputs of the things that I want. You telling me like, all right, you're going to get a house. It's going to take this long, but like, don't worry. And then, as I put in offers, it tells me my chances of getting a house. That way, like if I'm getting nervous, I'm throwing more money in, like it's correlated with like a computer telling me like, don't worry, your risks are going down. So you should put the more, I mean? So like something to just sort of balance that sort of money decision making.
Like almost to counter your human psychology, right? Like to be a little bit of like a coach
sounding
in your
board.
corner.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, in theory, the realtors are supposed to do this, but I think in practice they don't at all.
No.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't
Which is
think it's in
weird.
their
And we
interest.
pay them
to.
7% to be a coach, but they're often the
But
opposite.
the incentives
Their
aren't
incentive
aligned.
their incentive is shoot you through the roof. Right.
Right.
So,
And also as quickly as possible, right? Like
And
they
as quickly as
either
possible.
want, if you're going to waste their time, they want a lot of money out of you, or they want to get a
Yeah.
little bit of money out of you fast, or a lot of money fast,
Okay.
ideally.
Let's hear from Samir, and then let's circle back. I feel like there's a lot, at least there's a
Yeah.
couple of themes that are emerging, and it's gonna be good. Samir.
I have a great realtor who is not pushy at all, which is fantastic. So we're looking for a house, upgrading the one we have in terms of size. I think I'll talk about the experience I had when buying my current one, and it was all about neighborhood. So to me, the biggest problem to solve was what neighborhood do we want to be in, and then like the house was very secondary, and it's because we were we had at that time one kid, now two, and it was all about like where are we gonna be able to enjoy raising our family, schools. Actually, we had more. Funnily enough, we had more constraints of things we wanted outside the house versus inside the house, as in like neighborhood, type of street, distance to like shopping stores, whatever. And we actually wanted to be further away from that stuff, like that kind of thing. Then like we really cared. I think inside the house was more nice to have. Outside the house were more, great. And that kind of stuff actually, no Zillow or Redfin kind of allows you to easily find. Like you could search for 4 bedrooms more. You can't search for in a cul-de-sac, at least 10 minutes away from whatever, and like has a bunch of kids on the street. That's you can't search for. So that was one of the unsolved problems that we spent a bunch of time on. I also think in general, the idea of like how much should I pay, and if I don't get this one, am I okay, because this incremental progress sort of thing, problem that we all talked about is good. The thing, the angle on it that I felt was, look, in an environment where home prices keep going up, am I better off spending a little bit more to get this one versus finding the next one? But by the time I find the next one, I'm going to have to pay more anyways.
Yep.
So the idea of not paying more is just not even a concept anymore. And I think it goes to this idea of like the problems that need to be solved when the housing market is supply constrained are very different than the problems that need to be solved when the housing market is demand constrained. And so, yeah, I think like part of the ownership, like if you think about costs, there's cost to wait, cost to buy, and then cost after to sort of like improve and maintain. And I think no product gives you that sort of full view on costs.
Love it. By the way, that last part is really interesting, right? Because and that's why buying a home is actually I'm glad we're having this chat, because buying a home is a really interesting product problem. The home itself is really not obvious as what it is, right? I mean, obviously it's a place you can live, but it dictates your school district, right? It dictates, your quality of life in a material way. It's also a financial asset, right? It's also a hedge against inflation. So it's a really bizarre thing that we've invented as a society. It's not just a place to sleep or to store my stuff, which is how this all started. It's become this really complicated, interwoven set of things I'm trying to solve, both at a society level and a personal level, that we call a house. Okay, Samir, go ahead. You're about
Well,
to
I was
say
going to say these completely agree, and I think part of this is like, you were going to probably talk about like common themes or something, so I'll let you do that. But I think one of the things that is definitely part of the common themes is like when you look at the value a product can add, some of it is very utilitarian, like costs, blah blah blah, make the offer easy, make the financing easy, make the whatever. And part of it is like the psychology of like make the person buying just feel less scared or anxious.
Mhm.
And probably, a combination of both. Like you need to add utility, but also make you feel good at the same time. So when we talk about that, we should just talk about like,
sure.
yeah.
Actually, before we even zoom in, I think there's one level of this that we did not talk about. And again, I'm not advocating for this. I'm just saying like, let's have the picture painted before we decide. Like one of the reasons I think three of us bought on the West Coast, right? Avi, you bought not on the West Coast.
Yes.
Is it a hot market right now where you bought, Avi?
Yes, very hot market.
Okay, so
and it's probably like increased 25% over the past.
okay,
2
so
years.
so we all, because of our jobs and our families and such, we've all, for various reasons, chosen to live in very competitive, supply constrained markets, right? And to your point, Samir, if we're buying a home in Detroit, like this would be 9 days, we'd be having totally different set of conversations, right? So before we zoom into like making the house buying process better, like a more foundational problem we could choose to solve, although I don't think we will, is solve the supply liquidity, right? So
Yeah.
it almost like if you take a step back from buy a house, like why was it so hard to buy a house? Well, the reason was because you had way more people looking at the house than there were houses in market at the time. The prices could not keep up. Your psychology of how fast the prices are moving is totally warped, right? And so there's a supply problem. There's just not enough homes where people want to live, right? That's a kind of fundamental problem. I think another more fundamental problem is also related to that data, which is, there could be more liquidity if it was much easier to sell your home, right? So back to the not enough homes issue, right? Like the hassle of like, getting your home sold and moving to something smaller somewhere else, pretty high. Therefore, a lot of people stay. Also, the tax incentives in California are very skewed towards not doing that. Do we want to go there at all, or do we actually just want to pull back and say, hey, those are like structural, societal, state level problems. Let's just focus on the buying the home part.
I think since we're building something from first principles, I think it's really important to acknowledge the underlying reason, which is
Yes.
pure economics, right?
Yeah.
Right.
The demand of
Yeah.
where you were looking for is just greater than the supply.
Yes.
Um,
By a lot, right? It's
by
not close, right?
by a lot. And I think one important thing I want to call out on the first one, and I'll call out an important thing on the second one. But I agree, we should just focus not on this, but I think remote work helps or
Yeah.
should help alleviate the first one. Until there's a point where it doesn't, because land on Earth is finite and people turn out to be infinite because the rate to which we are growing on humanity is crazy. And then the second thing is there's already a company that actually helps try to solve the make it quick to sell your house. But let's
Talk
just
about
dive
Open
in.
Door.
I'm talking about Open Door, yeah.
Okay.
Interesting. I would say, DZ, that yes, like probably very good to acknowledge, like Ahmad said, less tractable to solve from a PM's perspective.
Yes.
Although one thing I will call out is like, to that point though, a good way to think about this from a PM's perspective, if someone's like, how do you solve the problem?
Yep.
Which DZ, it's a very good problem that you pointed out, which is like there are not enough houses
Mhm.
in, let's just say, LA that are on sale and like people want to buy it. One would spend a long time thinking about the politics and the whatever. And then another approach would also be like, I guess the answer to solving the supply problem in LA is to point the buyers that supply outside of LA. And
Possible.
that's the remote or the, you think about like high-speed transportation or other types of things. So it's always good to think about like the adjacency of problem
Yeah.
and also adjacency of solutions. Like what are the non-direct paths to solve some of these problems that are coming up? But yeah.
Plus one. Okay, so let's come back to the sort of, we've heard 4 different stories from us about our experiences. On balance, just from the voiceover, none of them sounded like pleasant. I would not describe any of these experiences like, wow, that was delightful. But maybe it can't be. I mean, it is kind of one of the biggest decisions you make in your life. There's a very high burden of like concern, your emotional weight, if you will. Samir, do you or Ahmad even who wants to take a pass at like some of the common things we heard, and then we can drill into a few of those and think about whether we think they're tractable. I think Ahmad, you made a very interesting point earlier on, which is like not all of these things we mentioned are actual problems, and then not all of them are actually tractable, meaning there may be something fundamental about those things that is a bad place for PMs to focus.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that all of us said is just this sort of aspect of competitive pressure and the way it takes a toll on our ability to make decisions. I don't know if there's like something really there, but that was just a common theme that I think all 4 of us had that could potentially, we could riff on. I don't know if you guys had any other thoughts there.
I think that's the one that really goes back to what's the fundamental root cause of that competitive pressure, which is a supply-demand imbalance, right? Like maybe I'm trying to say it's like, yes, your product could, could soften it in some ways, but like you're being crushed by this rock called supply-demand imbalance, right? In other words, I acknowledge it's a problem. I'm just questioning, given why it exists, whether any solution can really change it.
Oh, go ahead. Come on.
No. I was gonna say I think I agree. One thing maybe interesting would be that a lot of you guys, a lot of us were all like, by the end of it, screw it, I just need to buy a house, like do it. Yeah. And I wonder how many other people who are bidding also with us also feel that same 100%, thing.
100% right? Of them, like 99% of them.
Yeah, probably everyone.
Yeah. And so I guess another way of saying it is like, if maybe there was a way to better set expectations with everybody, or you could actually make the process put in such like, you'd have to like really bend the nature of consumer behavior in order to make something work, which therefore I think it's not worth it. But like in theory, if you had enough adoption where a bunch of users were like all using this product, you could potentially sway
I think,
it.
But I think Ahmad, you're right. And see, this is one of those like common traps I think you also called out, which is like, if only we could get everyone to change their behavior, then this thing would be great. And I think that's like, as a PM, I would be like, yeah, no, thank you. Because I actually worked on problems like this in the past. And like people, not everyone changes. I think it has to be individual incentivized based.
Yes,
if 100%. I do X, then I 100%. Get Y, therefore I use it. Oh, it turns out a whole bunch of people have the same incentive. Now a lot of people using it.
Yeah.
Avi, you're being polite.
Very polite. Avi.
Okay. One, I want to give a hot take here, but I'll point out 2 themes.
We should have one of those things that goes hot take. Hot take.
We need effects. Yeah, we need a theme song and effects. Two demands for next week.
If there's any super fan out there who's, into music.
Yeah, he's got the emoji.
Okay.
I hope these show up.
Let's hear the hot take.
Okay. Two themes. One is education. The second is accessibility. So Ahmad pointed out wisely that like by the time he wanted to buy a house, he didn't know the first step. And I'd say actually by the time you need to start saving for a house, it's 10 years before you actually need the house. Right. So if you are only figuring out,
unless you're Ahmad, right?
Unless you're Ahmad, but like generally, like you want to start saving.
I agree though. I agree with you.
So it's difficult. And also like most people will not be able to afford a house nowadays. Like the majority of, unlike previous generations, right?
Well, again, but that's a very strong segregation between like West Coast expensive cities, certain cities and metropolitans, and like,
that's
Tulsa,
fair,
right?
That's fair, but I think more so than ever. I think we can all agree on that.
I agree with Avi.
Less people can afford a house. So
affordability down.
What if the right answer here is you shouldn't get a house?
But
like in other words, like I think one of the things you mentioned, DZ, is that a house is an investment vehicle.
It's become one. We decided as a society that it's a store of value.
And historically, it's been a pretty good one. And that's mostly why people get a house, right? Because the other solutions to housing solve this problem equally, right? If you rent, you still get a roof over your head. In fact, you can probably get a nicer roof over your head for less per month. And so what if the answer is we should allow people to invest in other ways but rent their entire life. And I think, Samir, you could argue this is one of those problems where you're trying to change behavior, but I think more and more behaviors are already moving that direction, where you have lifelong renters who are in comfortable financial positions.
I would agree that. I mean, I think the if you decompose this from a jobs to be done perspective, I think you'll find that houses do different jobs for people.
Yep.
One of them is put roof overhead, and I think in that case, you're right. There are many people who can find better roofs over their head. If it's in the job to be done is hedge against inflation, that's great. Another one is like, provide stability where like, yeah, I could rent, but then I might get kicked out and I could still rent, but now it's a different place. So it's stability. So I think it's like the reality is that everyone has the house solve a combination of these 3 or more jobs to be done. And if you alleviate one, it's not necessary that the others don't apply. Yeah. But you are right. For someone on the margin, actually, there's probably a large chunk of people to whom they would be happy to put their money to use, like to invest somewhere else. And they're just looking for a roof over there, in which case, like a path to lifelong rental is a great answer.
Yeah.
By the way, I don't think it's necessarily a hot take so much it is like it's a trick answer, right? It was similar to my earlier comment of like, hey, the root cause of all of this is like state policies that create supply imbalances due to local legislation of land rights usage, blah, 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 right? And therefore, there's nothing to be done. I think here is similarly, I'll be like, I agree with your sentiment about and the way you broke it down of like, what's the rationale for buying a house and is it sensible? But I still think that's largely not the issue at hand. In other words, like when people are ready to buy a house, they're ready to buy a house. And the only reason they don't buy the house is they can't afford it or they can't figure out the process or it breaks down, blah, blah, right? But we're really talking, like, I feel like in advocacy of focus, like we should focus in on, there's a bunch of human beings who want to buy a house, whether that's a sensible thing for them to do or not.
Sure.
Well, we're not going to make comment. And in that journey, and it's a very emotional journey, it's a very expensive journey. To your point, maybe that journey actually started before this person even knows about this, right? In that journey, what products could be built to make that better?
Okay, let me give you a hot take. There's nothing here. And the reason I say there's nothing here is because I believe there's a lot of problem to be solved in terms of like making people feel better and stuff. But there's no economics in this that would make such a product favorable.
You don't think there's like a Redfin competitor that focuses more on the buyer?
I think there could be, but the fundamental problem they would be solving is the Redfin compete part. As in, they would need to get all the listings. They would need to have a slick interface for finding. They would need to do blah, blah. Yeah, you could say like, oh, by the way, okay, so let me give you, remember when Zillow first came out, they had the Zestimate?
Okay, yes.
Like I used to go to Zillow for the Zestimate a lot because that was like unique. But like, think about how simple a problem they solved versus the complexity of like making people feel better. And like, it was like, there's a listing. That's what they're asking for. What's it really worth? And by the way, this is like, our product roadmap by question, right? Which is like, what question do people want solved? Which is like, how much is really worth? Well, that's the product they built. It's called Zestimate, and they got so many users out of it. But since then, like Redfin's come along, I don't think they've solved any new problems on top of what Zillow has. And like, they're smart tech companies. And my point is, if there was something from an experience perspective, they would have taken so hot take. There's not much, is my point.
I think he's probably right. I think if we wanted to hone in on something, like I think for what it's worth, I also think the problem of DZ, you said it really well. It's like there's a set of people who want to buy a house. We're not going to comment on whether or not that's good for them. I also think that's too maybe broad. We can also even focus even in there if we wanted to sort of simplify for the context of this meeting. And one potential path is I've noticed that, at least this is my experience, I don't know if you guys are running into anybody, there's a lot of people out there who don't want to pay for an agent, right?
Yeah. It feels wrong, right?
I bought my house from someone who just had a real estate license, but he knew nothing about selling. I hope he's not watching this, but he knew nothing about selling homes.
Which is probably why you got
and
such a good deal, right? It was good for
And
you.
I got a
bad for him.
great deal. He was an idiot. He had no idea what he
bad
was
for him,
doing.
right?
Yeah, it's such. I mean, and I think maybe there's like something in here about like a peer-to-peer, like completely cut the agent type situation. For people who are like, they're just trying to like get the transaction and not deal with the agent.
You know what you pointed out here, Ahmad, which we didn't do yet, which is segment the market.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
too big of a problem. We need to zoom in somewhere.
Right.
First
See,
time
we were
buyers?
we were making a common PM mistake on purpose to illustrate to our viewers.
Of course we were. That
What-
was
what-
intentional, guys. 100%.
But Ahmad's right. Like these jobs to be done, actually, are separate markets, and then there's also sub jobs. Like there's a buyer like if you think about personas, there's a buyer focused on finding like flips, and so there's probably a product in there to help them identify and do that flip.
Yeah.
There's a buyer persona that's focused on finding market inefficiencies. Like this person doesn't know the gem they have, and there's nothing in there except for hours and hours and hours of scrolling to go and find it.
Or even better, but wait, I mean, on that idea, there's probably a market for like, if you only made these two changes, your value will go up 20%.
Right. There you go.
Yeah.
Right.
Diamond in the rough.
Remodel
Diamond in
the
the rough.
kitchen, add 200K, right?
Exactly. By the way, that's a great one because the applicability of that goes from just people who are finding inefficiencies to also regular buyers who are like, oh yeah, like, it's a buyer product and a seller product. Cause you could think about it like, if I spend 30 grand to do my kitchen, my house should be worth X more.
Yeah.
And that's a great,
You could build the same product, launch it to both users and see who actually uses it.
Exactly.
And then go from there. Yeah.
Yeah. I also think that there's this element of Avi, is your hand still up from before? Or?
Oh no, I left it up from before.
There's also
patient.
there's also this product of like, if you notice that there's like Fundrise or Cadre, these other like crowdfunding platforms. Like I have often wanted to invest in real estate, but like not some like rando commercial. Like the process of like investing in residential real estate in just chunks or crowdfunding. I think there's an opportunity there to solve the job of like store of value, right?
Yeah.
Instead of buying a bar of gold or a Bitcoin, which sadly has not been doing very well over the last few days. You could buy, a chunk in someone's house.
Okay. Where does that leave us? So are we going to zoom in or are we going to like continue riffing?
I had another one, can I be the crazy PM in the room for a second?
That is your general responsibility, Ahmad.
Great. We can also just fucking skip the physical space and go straight into virtual and just go live.
Now you're talking.
You know what I mean?
This is it,
and just
Ahmad, this is why.
Is there a
solve-
Bitcoin
yeah,
thing here too?
yeah.
I don't know about.
I'm just
No,
saying, like,
you're right. You're right.
Like Mark thinks, VR is the future. We could just start building real homes in VR
That's it.
and then just start selling those. Just
like
saying,
that.
like,
Ahmad, I completely
why buy a
agree
house
with
in
you.
the physical space when you can get one in the virtual one?
I
Just
completely
saying.
agree with you. I completely agree with you.
I think
DZ is so shocked he doesn't even know what to say.
No. I think you guys are saying that. How do I put this? I think you guys are highlighting the fact that some of this stuff is pretty intractable, actually.
Yeah.
Right? Like those fundamental forces, like the fact that we as a society have invented this notion of a house, which is a combination of jobs to be done. And we've decided that as a society over time. We have this shared story about, houses are stores of value. The fact that you have these strong supply and balance problems, the fact that geographic movement is not that fast, right? There's real friction in me deciding to move to Tulsa, right?
DZ, I think yes to everything you said, but actually we're forgetting one huge thing, which is we recently went through the Evergrande,
Totally.
like
Fiasco.
Fiasco. And I think what Ahmad has pointed out by this virtual house stuff is that if you think about it, not all the jobs to be done by housing actually require the house itself, which is kind of what your point, right? Like the roof over your head, yes, but the store of value, not really. The prestige that comes from owning something that you could show someone and impress something by doesn't actually need the house. It could be a virtual house, right? So,
And
Yeah, go ahead.
Even the roof over your head. I mean, it can't be done by the virtual house, but it doesn't have to be done by
Yeah,
buying a house,
owning,
right?
right,
You know, it
right.
certainly doesn't have to be done by owning.
right. So just like people spend so much making their virtual like avatars and whatever look, so good. It's like, why not have a virtual house?
Yeah, look. What you
Yeah.
guys are saying has a lot of merit. Yes, in the crazy PM realm of things, but like, don't forget, these are human beings who need to physically live somewhere. Their kids need to go to school. This is all tied to your house, right?
Okay. All right. Yes. I'll say one last thing though. If we were raising money, if we said we're building something for the virtual space, we'd 10x our valuation, and we'd also be able to ride the tailwind of NFTs. Just saying, like, we're teaching these PMs.
DC, when did you become the exec that says no to everything? Hey, Avi, where did he go to school and get this?
Yeah, where do they teach this?
I'm in the business of trying to solve the problem of helping people live in a location. You go like, forget that. The real world is fake anyways. Okay. Material goods don't matter.
But
you don't need to eat. You can just exist in the ether, in the metaverse.
I think virtual housing is going to be epically huge.
Look, I'm not disputing that fact. I'm just saying that does not solve the problem of where you're going to live, right?
Well, but the DC, that's not the problem
thing.
we were talking about. We were talking about like in the
How to buy a
housing
house.
space. Yeah. Like if there was like a Park Avenue in virtual space and I owned a home there, I'd be talking about it to everyone. You would put your goggles on or whatever and go see it. And they'd be like, that guy's a baller.
Your point is, I think implicitly what you guys are advocating for is the problem to solve or the angle, so to speak, in how to buy a home.
Yeah.
That's worth taking is not these little small ideas, right? It's not like make the buy flow more personable and like supportive and blah blah blah, or make a better filtering engine for Redfin for flippers, whatever. Like there's lots of ideas in that kind of.
But by the way, those problems are probably like if you sub-segment to like helping the flipper find homes, there's probably a limited market with good margins in there.
Sure.
Yeah,
But you guys are saying that's not what you want to focus. What you guys are implicitly arguing for is what you want to attempt to do, and I will argue back that this is not easy or good attempt. But what you guys are arguing that you're
look at this guy already being the downer.
No. I'm the voice of reason.
Tells us.
What you guys are trying to say is you want to separate out the bundle that's called a house. Today,
Right,
the
unbundle.
bundle is
Unbundle.
called place where I can sleep, place where I can send my kids to school, right? Because it's still tied to the physical world, and store value. And you guys are saying, no. In 2050, we'll look back and go, boy, those are the dark ages, right? Why would we ever bundle these value propositions into one thing? It makes it so complicated. Ahmad, it makes it very emotional, unnecessarily emotional. You get this weird supply demand imbalance, blah, blah. What you guys want to say is like, let's strip out the store value use case into the ether and get people to buy virtual prestige properties to store value, right? And as they start
also to express themselves,
to express themselves.
Yeah.
And as they do more and more of that, the need to store value in your home, because frankly, the home is one of your biggest ways to store value today, right? Like for most people, for many people, right? Because you get leverage and there's all these tax benefits, blah, blah, blah. That's the angle you guys want to take, is to strip out the store value.
Okay. You forgot something also important is I can also, in my virtual world where your virtual house, send your kids to a virtual school that's amazing.
Yeah.
That, so just saying, like, even
on
the
a
school,
Zoom call, right?
You know what DZ's wondering?
No,
how did these
virtual
guys become
classroom,
such
man. Have
bad
you not seen-
PMs in 5 minutes? Like, what are these idiots?
I just feel like it's a sign of the times, right? Like it's very telling that this is the ideation in 2021, right?
Okay, look, I'll be a good PM.
I'm not against it, by the way. I
build some alignment.
Okay.
What if we met in the middle here? Okay.
No,
said something-
that's horrible.
Where's the middle? No
okay,
compromise.
Look, you said something that was actually really interesting.
Okay,
which
go on.
was
I have something then.
which was it's very hard for you to just move to, let's just say, Oklahoma. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
But and a big friction point for buying a house in Oklahoma is you got to fly to Oklahoma.
You gotta know people that, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, etc.
Right. One thing that we could do to fix a more like fundamental problem is there's a supply of houses out there
Yes.
that could meet the demand, right?
Yes.
And what if there was a way that we could connect these existing supply of houses to this demand in a way that made the behavior to move to a different area much easier.
Ah,
You know?
That's
Right?
right.
So
I like
that's
this
very
idea
interesting.
better. Yeah.
I throw virtual glasses on
Well-
to like a place in Oklahoma, and I'm like, go look at your house that's in Oklahoma, and
I
et
don't
cetera.
know. I don't know. I wouldn't do it. I mean, from an investment property, sure, but at that point, like, I don't know.
So Avi's raised that, but I'll just mention one thing. Sorry, Avi, before we jump in. Like, I mean, again, we're not going to solve the product problem, obviously, today, but so
I
far,
like how he assumes we're not going to get
obviously,
anything
yeah.
done.
Oh,
Yeah.
we have like really got this problem written, figured out.
No, but
that's
at
the
least-
I mean,
so-
only
so-
one
so-
of us went to MIT, so I
Oh.
agree. We're not going to get everything done. Yeah.
But so
also
far,
fair, yeah.
so far we've
Yeah.
identified two problems that we could we attempt to solve. One of them is called strip out the store value. Okay, that's problem number one. Problem number two, Ahmad, what you're highlighting is lower the friction of moving somewhere else. Like this globally, right? On a national level, even on a state level, there is no supply demand imbalance, right? I don't at least it's not that severe, right? So like if maybe there is a real play to lean into the work from home effect of COVID to say like, what product would you build to lower the friction of you moving to Montana by a factor of 10? Like, what would that product do?
That product would not scale, but yes.
No, but
I don't
what would it
know.
be? What
And there's
would the
diff-
elements of this product be?
There's different I mean, we're giving the extreme use case, right? Moving to Montana or Oklahoma, but there is probably like a use case here where like we show you that you have friends in San Diego, Samir, and that maybe like San Diego could also be interesting.
If you
for
need
right?
to
And it's
show me I
actually-
have friends in San Diego, they're not
Don't
my
have
friends.
friends in
No,
San
like,
Diego.
look,
know,
let me be
you know what I
honest. Okay,
mean.
Look. I get where all these are good points. If I was gonna start a company today in the real estate
Exactly.
market,
Yes. What would it be?
I would do buy with Bitcoin. That's it. And the reason I would
Oh.
do it is I would say I would open up the market to people with assets that they want to trade in for a home, that lets them swap a store of value, that makes it super hard to do it today for
Is
the
it?
buyers and the sellers.
Wait,
Yeah,
is
man.
it
You can't
super
buy
hard
with
to sell my
Bitcoin today?
Bitcoin
How-
and then
yeah, like,
use
you
that
just-
to buy a house?
You gotta like
Yeah.
cash it in and I would just like
Isn't there a button on Coinbase that will literally
Okay,
do this?
Hold up. Yeah. You remember that we had a whole what episode did we do on like workarounds that are like, what I mean? Like, is the workaround really like, is the
That hard?
workaround
Is
versus
it painful enough?
Yeah.
Yeah. Samir, should we refer you to that episode?
Are you telling me? Hang on a second. I read this tweet.
Uh-huh.
About how this guy was pricing his home or his New York City apartment in like whatever dollars. No one's buying it. Then he priced it in Ether, and like some whatever kid just bought it. I don't know if that's true or not, but like think about it this way: opening up. Oh my God, are you telling me it's a bad idea? Because I think it's a great idea.
You read a
It's swapping
tweet.
one
and
thing
you're-
about-
we
You're
really
basing your
devolved into
argument
degenerate
on a
PMs,
tweet
right?
that you don't even know if it's true.
Yeah. Like we started this, by the way. We started this with like thoughtful,
Yeah.
intelligent
Like,
discourse, analysis.
I think my hot take is right, which is there's not much here.
That's probably the best thing you said so far.
No,
That's a real good.
I have to disagree because like
Avi,
too
go
much
for it.
has changed. Like too much has
Mm.
changed in the world for the home buying process to remain the same.
Okay.
Like it's odd, right? It would be odd if like there were not a better way to like help us do this.
Look, if I were to launch a company, if I were to go raise money,
Yeah. Okay.
and
Let's
build a company in
wrap
the
on
space.
This is a good way
Right.
to wrap.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I
Samir would do
I
Coinbase.
used mine as a joke. I wasn't really
No,
like
you were 100%
my
serious.
God.
No, if you were actually going around the room and talking about real
That's your
things-
company.
We'll come back
Yeah.
to you. We'll come back to you. Ahmad.
you were the guy who basically built a Coinbase Cash App.
Right, that's right. but tailor made for house buying, right?
Yes, you
Right.
can only cash it out if you tell us
Coin
you're
house.
for sure going to buy a house.
Yeah,
That's right.
It's the Google Chrome extension that prices it a bit.
There's a mortgage application built in or something.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
Ahmad,
okay.
if you were to build a company
I were-
today in the
I
real
would-
estate buying house space, it would be
I would build something that is purely focused on peer-to-peer selling. So
cut out the
you're
agent.
cut out the agents and family, connections, right? Like I want to sell you my house. We don't need to put it in the market. Or there's you see a lot of off-market deals. I don't know if you obviously don't see this, but if you talk to your agents,
Yeah.
there is a lot of off-market deals that happen, right? And so I would lean into that as my because then I can own the experience end to end. You know what I mean? Between user A and user B, what that process looks like.
Okay, okay, so let's take my ask for each of us, because I think we talked about in a previous pod. You know, amateurs talk about product and professionals talk about distribution, right?
Mhm.
So I buy the thesis, the peer-to-peer, you know, cut out the middleman, make it more efficient, more transparent, even perhaps. How would you literally start this thing? Like, what would be your hook to get it going?
Yeah. So the hook would be for people like my previous owner, people who want to sell their house but not pay for the agent, right? So that would be the hook that gets the initial sellers onto the platform, right? And when they list their house on Zillow or on, you know, whatever it is that it's for sale, rather than saying like, you know, we're working through an agent, it would be like, click this link to download my app as the buyer to like put a bid in on my house and schedule an appointment to come like see my house directly. So I'd completely just straight up skip the agent in that process. And it's got this like nice little network effect, right? Every seller would bring me like 10, 12 buyers who are potentially maybe thinking about selling their house themselves. So anyway, that's the pitch. Samir,
Okay, Samir
completely ignored me. Just
100%. And he was trying to come up with a better idea than the
I
Bitcoin
didn't
Cash App.
ignore. I got a text.
Okay. Avi, let's go to Avi. We'll give Samir some time.
Okay.
He's got to regroup
Yeah,
after
some
this.
time to.
No, not okay. Fine, go. Avi, yeah.
Coin House app. Avi, if
All
you
right.
were starting, so the same directions.
I'm between two things, right? So one, I
Mm-hmm.
would build the Robinhood for real estate, right? So I'd want to make investing in real estate accessible early on and piecemeal, right? So you don't have to buy an entire house, but like at 18, you could buy a piece of a house and start to get into real estate and build your portfolio in an accessible way. Maybe you can do this day. I don't know. The other thing I would build is the advantages of renting but buying. So like in other words, like you buy almost like a timeshare model for houses, right? Where like you buy into something but can move when you need to. So like my hypothesis is people want to be more mobile now more than ever, like especially with remote work. I think people are like understanding the benefits of not being tied down. And how do you enable that? How do you lean into that while at the same time providing that store of value?
Okay. Samir, back to you, buddy.
I'm really down on this. So I'm being
You're down in the space, right?
Yeah. Like actually, you know, I was thinking about this, and the answer is I like what the youngins have said.
Yeah.
But this is not something that I would get very excited to go to work in every day in this space. By the way, I'll tell you something completely irrelevant, but not that irrelevant because it doesn't apply to the market of today. There was a time where the market was demand constrained and there were a lot of houses. And at that point I'd said there was a problem that I was interested in, which is like there were literally like for sale signs on every street.
Yeah, you're talking like 08, 09, right? 08,
Okay,
09
right.
was a great time to buy it.
Right. So in that market, DZ, there was this idea that I had, well, say you're a realtor and you're like taking a client. These clients are like gems. They're like, you know, they're probably meeting with multiple realtors too. Like they are the, you know, kings and queens of the world. And the question, if I were a realtor, what would I say about house A that would be different than house B, except like the stuff that you could see on the sheet anyways? And so I thought about like, what if you contextualize it? Like, what if you had this tool where you could give it the you know, the MLS report or whatever, and it would spit out some like unique things like, hey, this home has the largest backyard in a 10 on 10 school district from where you're looking. You're like, oh, I like backyards. I like school districts. Like, and now I know why I'd want this home. So like something that like took the facts of the home, compared it and contextualized it in facts in the context of all the other facts, and gave you these like human understandable reasons that kind of, you know, were not just analytical, but like also spoke to the emotional parts of what you want, and would like make it easier to talk about the home for the realtor or even like understand the home for the buyer.
I really like this, but why not let the users do that?
Yeah. Like as the user, you would
Mm.
like select what's important to you or whatever. But this would just like think about like spitting out a rank set of facts that like contextualize a home, and like,
Mm.
oh, this one's got, like this one's got like you really sometimes what pisses me off is like you go to a home and like the bedrooms, the non-master bedrooms are too small. And you're like, oh, of all the homes in the market, this has the largest non-master bedrooms. Like, okay, I really like this home because of that. Like, even if I went to visit it, I wouldn't know that fact about it.
Mm.
So something that like contextualize why the home is special in an automated way, so you can do it at scale.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
But I was-
question for you.
I like
Just
it.
throwing distribution at you.
Mm.
What if you type in your house, Samir, the one that
Yeah.
you're living in now,
Yeah.
and it spits out there's nothing unique about your house?
Right.
How are you gonna distribute that? Like how do you as a seller,
Yeah.
how do you like use that product? And the answer is probably you don't.
I mean, I think this is one of those things where like it tries to find. It's like in schools today they make everyone a winner in some way. They're like, oh, I'll be like, great job packing your bag or something. Like it try to do something, but it also tell you like at some point like some homes are not going to be that special.
I think we should combine forces. So I have an answer. I have an answer finally. I went last because I was trying to figure this out. Okay, so if I look at Redfin and Zillow today, right, all the tooling in the marketplace is actually for the sellers, right? The buyers, you're the product, right? You don't like if I'm not paying Redfin any money, then Redfin's making money off of me, right? Who's paying Redfin money? It's the real estate agents, right? So I would create it's actually a little bit riffing on what Ahmad said at the beginning. I would create a subscription product, or maybe not sub. I mean, who knows how we monetize exactly, but I would create a product that's really buyer first, right? That really focuses and concentrates on your needs as a buyer, helps you create a portfolio. You scrape. I think to your point, Samir, this data is all in the MLS. It's not like Redfin has proprietary access to this data. At least not a big chunk of it, right? I would just create all the workflows, those little worksheets, that little model you were describing, a model of like, hey, where am I in this process? That guidance tips. But the main difference would be I wouldn't take money from the sellers. It's a little bit like the models that you see today where there's certain companies trying to create search engines that are not monetized by ads, right? I don't know if that's gonna be successful, by the way. Like that's a separate argument, but like I think if I were to make an attempt in the space, it would be, hey, what platforms out there could be inverted where, today they are seller first and buyer second implicitly, right? And you can invert that prioritization. And as a result, you end up with a different set of features and a different set of use cases. And frankly, like Redfin, to say bluntly, Redfin incentivizes, Redfin creates FOMO, right? Like Redfin is not there for you, Ahmad, right? It's there for the person selling. It's designed to get you a little bit high. Like all the little signals and visual cues of Redfin are escalating your emotional, tone, so to speak, right? Because it's again, because you are the bait, you are the product, you are the thing
Redfin's
that
whole
Redfin
job is to get your ass into the house.
Exactly. Yes. Right. Because the person who pays Redfin are the realtors, right? For listing fees and marketing fees and whatnot. So I'm not giving you like a feature set. I'm just saying like, imagine you inverted this and said, we're going to create a product and platform that is only for buyers. We're only going to take money from buyers. Our interests are directly aligned to the buyer's needs, right? What feature set would you build? How does platform work? Even the look and feel, even the way you comms everything, I think it'd be different. And I think like back to the earlier point I was making, like, in general, in any product area, I feel like there's a be successful, feel successful difference. Like, in other words, you can be more successful, buy your house faster, right? But I think in some cases, there's an equally valid product to be built for just feeling more successful, right? More sort of catered towards, more nurtured, more supported. Anyhow, I'm not saying I would do this. I'm not like to Samir's point, maybe the meta point is like, I'm not really in love with this idea at all. But if I was to make any attempt in the space, it would be flip this on its head, be buyer first, don't take money that would cause you to reprioritize, prioritize sellers first and see what happens. If there's anyone listening to our pod who wants to fund a startup, I'll give it a shot.
We gave you five ideas. 5 ideas actually.
Yeah, well,
'cause
including
Samir-
including Coin House. I mean, that's
Yeah.
that's
By
probably
the
the
way,
one that exploded
which
first.
is totally a feature in my house or in my app. By the way, Samir, if
Features
you're-
become
if-
product lines by themselves, man. Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
the world we're in. Okay, guys, how do you feel? How was
Hey,
it?
feel okay.
so I'm glad we didn't tell anyone to like, subscribe, or hit the bell icon. Do they still have those features on YouTube? I don't even know.
I've heard
'cause
once. Yeah,
They
it's-
must. Yeah.
Some
yeah.
of them at least.
If someone likes us, what button should they press? Is there like a like button or something?
I think
don't
there's a
remember.
like button. They
Okay.
could comment.
Okay, they
Perhaps.
could leave that. What else?
If
could they
anyone
do?
has made it to this point in the pod, like
Yeah,
you know,
I mean, please like, subscribe, and no, please no. We're not asking you to hit like,
No, of course
subscribe.
not.
No,
No.
we're never doing that.
You
Yeah.
stumble into it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Please
Just
like
button
it if
mash
you
and see what
want,
happens,
but
you
not
know.
that we're asking you to like it or subscribe or hit the bell icon. Do we have a
Oh.
message from our sponsors today?
who are our sponsors? Let's do carve-outs. Let's do carve-outs.
Well,
What's
we
top
can
of
do a
mind?
sponsor. Do
Who?
you want to do a sponsor?
Yes, who's sponsoring us?
Today's episode was brought to you by Open Door. If you're
Ah.
thinking about selling your house, use Open Door.
Wait, we're like doing free ad placements now. That's the
No,
desperation?
I do the ad placement and then I send them an email asking them if they'll pay us for it.
Oh, that's
okay,
good.
Oh, smart.
Just send them a bill.
genius.
Yeah.
Genius.
It-
That's right.
It never works, but hey, you try.
Hey,
You try.
why
you
not?
try. Okay.
Carve
Last but not
outs.
least, gentlemen, this was great. I actually had a lot of fun, even though our ideas were not what I expected.
Well,
but
hang
well,
on.
Not
I
good.
think there's a great product lesson here, which is in our first episode we talked about how one of the biggest mistakes people make is work on the wrong product idea
Totally.
or the problem
or
space.
wrong problem. Yeah.
Yeah, the wrong
Yeah.
problem. And I think this proves
here we
just
are.
how much. Well, it proves how hard it is to find a meaningful problem to work on.
Also, to be
Well-
totally honest, like you're not gonna know if this
No.
problem is good or bad by riffing on it for an hour. Like,
Right.
Like somebody
Right.
should actually go pursue each of the ideas we named. Those are, and you'll find out whether they're really good problems or not. Only that way.
Or
Unfortunately.
none of the ideas we named and come up with your own.
Also, for what it's worth, we spent I think an hour discussing, or however long it's been, an hour discussing the problem and only 2 minutes coming up with a
That's
solution.
okay. That's
for it.
good. I 100%
Yeah,
agree
I
with
like
that.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's that. But I think it's worth next time maybe like just going down the solution if the
Well,
survey responses that are
You
in
know,
the link
if
below.
our readers have problems they want us to think about, we're
Yes.
happy to do that too.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, let's do that. So
If they're reading the podcast, we have bigger problems.
Right.
yeah,
That's right. Okay, gentlemen, let's close out. Let's talk about some top of mind things, some carve outs, and then we'll wrap up for this week. Ahmad.
Can I? All right. Look, I'll go. I hate going first because I got
You don't have to go
noodle and think.
We'll make Avi go first. Avi. Go
Oh
first.
yeah.
Oh,
Yes,
God.
thank you.
Phew.
Ah,
Oh, Jesus.
I totally got out of it, and you had
Wait, you got some
I-
nothing top of mind?
Come here.
was
All right, hey,
stalling.
MIT, go
do you have
ahead.
something?
Hey, MIT, go. You go.
So look, I think the thing that's been top of mind for us, we have some young kids. I think I mentioned this before. Kids are back in school, and I think implicitly a lot of us have been thinking about, hey, what happens after COVID? You know what I mean? Like, hey, after COVID, we're gonna do all this cool stuff, or we're gonna do this stuff, and recently I've come around and just said, this is after COVID. We are there, right? So like, in a weird way, I think I personally have a mental shift called, I'm not waiting for COVID to end anymore. Like, it's a permanent fixture, whether it's COVID or Delta or Theta or whatever else comes. This is the new world. We're going to wear masks a lot. You're going to get a booster shot every 6 months. You're going to be a little bit more careful. Social gatherings are a little bit more awkward. And it'll be okay. So I that's it. The only thing top of mind for me is like, we are post-COVID. This is it. This is the world we live in.
That's great. Okay, I'll go. One of my favorite sayings, one of my favorite phrases is, it's all good until it's not. I think it applies to so many situations. And sadly, sometimes also the market, and investments and all these other things. So what recently came to mind, I was discussing investments with a buddy, and what came to mind is I was, as I was doing some research, like everyone is making ridiculous amounts of money. You hear about like college kids what is it, TikToking their stock advice and making like whatever, and it's all good until it's not. And I think one of the problems is that the it's not hasn't happened for a long time now, to the point where I sometimes doubt that it would ever happen. Obviously, well, but like this is one of those things where like you're like, oh, rationality will happen at some point. Oh, some point, and it's been like a decade.
Yeah.
And things are even like because of COVID accelerated. So it's all good until it's not implies that you can't, like, the reason it's all good until it's not sharply is because you lose track of the fact that at some point something's going to happen bad. And
there's
there's
an entire generation that are the children of summer, right?
Yeah.
Just one thing on this. Like recently, we were having dinner with my team, and I was talking about the '08 crash, and it's not like I was old or had a lot of money then at that time, but I remember it very distinctly. And I was like, "Hey, what were you doing in '08?" And he was like, "I was in the 5th grade," and I was like,
right,
holy, like you have not, you've experienced a
right.
That person's
version
even
of the
younger
world.
than me. That person's even younger than me.
Exactly.
Holy fuck.
I mean, the thing I'll say is, like, COVID is an example of it's all good until it's not. Like,
yeah.
everything.
The black
You
swan events will
want to
come.
go out and you want to go out and breathe air, like you can until you can't.
Yeah.
And that's like, it's okay. That's my thought of the day.
Okay. Sobering, but yes, great one.
For what it's worth, a lot of amazing companies were born as a result of that.
Totally.
As a result of 08. Airbnb,
Yeah.
Pinterest, hey, Samir, you
Stripe?
enjoying that salary of yours? Yeah, Stripe. All of those are, born out of like the tailwinds of like what happened in 08. So, even when it drops, things can still turn around.
I mean, I think the crazy thing, I mean, maybe Samir's alluding to this, is like when it's good, you think it'll never get bad, right? And when it's bad, you think it's never going to get good. Like we are not a species with very good memories, like we're just like, oh, today was like yesterday. That's all I know, right? But in reality, the world moves in circles more than it does any other way. Adi?
Right, I'll
Adi.
go. I think, these gaps in between our episodes have made me realize how difficult content creation is. And like, I hear this all the
it makes you remember how much you miss us, but okay.
Well, that too. It's
I was also expecting that, and we did not get that answer.
How little I miss
Hot
you guys.
take, he doesn't care.
I want the effect again. No, but just like it's a lot of work, and like we do one of the easiest versions. We record live, then we upload. But like just how much like thought goes into just creating a minute's worth of content on like a YouTube or a Spotify or anything like that. And I think a lot of people think about the gig economy and content creators like this is the easy life, right? Like this is so much easier than a job. But in reality, I think what we're discovering is it's actually equally as difficult, if not more difficult. And we haven't even really found an audience yet necessarily, right? So I think there's a whole aspect of it that we don't even indulge in. And I don't know, it's kind of eye-opening for me.
She's not feeling very good.
Yeah. Okay. We'll wrap. But Avi, totally agree with you, man. This is not the ones that do it really well make it look so easy. And you're like, oh,
exactly.
I could get on a camera and talk for 2 hours about MacBooks.
And it's surprisingly difficult. It's Ahmad.
Yeah. So for me, and this has actually been very top of mind, and we talked about it, I think twice, is as I'm thinking about building my own company, and I have a lot of friends building their own as well. I've been thinking a lot about companies and their innovations, right? And a trend and I've been doing a lot of research on companies, like how did Robinhood get big? How did Airbnb get big? How did Pinterest get big? How did X get big? And a lot of companies get big off of like the macro trend of either the internet or the mobile era. Companies now getting big off of the like crypto or NFT trend. right? And so a lot of my thought process has been like, how do you figure out how to like plug into the trend in a way that's like actually meaningful and pushes your business forward? Because these companies become very hard to disrupt when they get in place, right? Like no beef towards anybody here or where they work, but there's some garbage stuff, from like these big tech companies that like, but it's so hard to like overthrow them because of their ability to distribute. And so there could be a better product out there, but it's impossible to get it in the hands of users because like, it's just, LinkedIn, YouTube, Google, Facebook, Instagram, they're all just so sticky that it becomes like,
I've
very
decided
tough to
that
overthrow.
I've decided on our pod, Ahmad is the closest to Chamath, right? He
Yeah,
brings the heat,
definitely.
the Chamath point of view, right? 100%.
And maybe
Chamath's
not a
answer-
billionaire today, but
not yet,
soon to be a
but
billionaire.
we just need some.
Yeah.
Chamath's answer to your question.
You guys
Ahmad.
gave me the poor guy?
The pork. Okay, fair enough. That's right. We want this to start controversy with the people that are not listening to our pod. But his point of view to your question, Ahmad, is like that's one of the few areas where you actually need regulation and the government to step in. Is when you have quasi-monopolistic distribution channels.
Yeah, because you want the superior product to win, but that's not the case today in America, and it's definitely not the case in big tech.
Yeah.
Anymore,
not.
right? Because of where we are today versus 2010 versus 2000.
Correct. And I think, the trend of people having a lot of money and investing that into VCs and then those VCs investing it into a bunch of it's very easy to get a deal, as you guys have seen. Definitely not going to post this on my LinkedIn now. But like, hopefully that inspires like a new generation of entrepreneurs to actually like, create more meaningful innovation for
Look at
people.
this guy inspiring a new
Inspiring,
generation of
inspiring.
entrepreneurs. I love it.
Mini Chamath.
Yeah.
That's okay. We're gonna ping him and see what happens. Okay, guys, this is a lot of fun. We should actually. I think this is great. I mean, this is more real than a lot of our conversations when it comes to product,
Yeah.
right? Like this is a real product conversation with something that none of us really know that much about.
It's also very much like our off record conversations
Yeah,
where
totally.
we
Yeah.
talk about what's really on our mind and not always, do find a clean
Find it.
answer.
Yeah. Sometimes there are
Yeah.
no answers, or at least we're gonna find them in the hour that we have together.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, have a great week.
Yeah. You too. See you
See ya.
guys.
Later.
See you guys.
Bye.